Greetings. On today's edition of Creating Monsters, we're going to be working on a bugbear. This isn't just any bugbear, it's another classic miniature, as this bugbear is from the old wonderful game, which I can more appreciate these days, of Dragon Strike. What made it special at that time is that you could actually go into rooms and read what happens in that room and such. I don't remember any other game doing that. And back in the day, the big one was, of course, Hero Quest, and Hero Quest was much more simple than that. But today, what's special about this paint-up is, I'm not just going to do any paint-up, but rather follow a triad of colors. Now, how a triad of color works, as you can see in this color wheel, isn't quite like the complementary color triangle, which will do the three colors that are most opposite to one another or equally spaced out. It will also do a triangle, but it's a much thinner sort of triangle. For example, here we have blue, and that triangle, as this color wheel also does show, then branches out into the triangle, other two colors which are closer together. In this case, we're going to be using yellow-orange and red-orange, and so that third color will be blue. And we're still welcome to use the different tints, tones, and shades of those colors. Now for this one, I'm not doing it randomly. I already chose the colors because I just want things to fit in with my vision right now. But in the future, I wouldn't mind doing this with just spinning this and doing random colors, as well as doing other versions such as a complementary color triangle or monochromatic or analogous, these other ways of choosing color. I did actually start painting this guy roughly 30 years ago or so. I already cleaned him up to a point where I'm happy with, and so the next step is for me to clean up any visible mold lines, and there's also that number 2 next to his foot. I would like to remove that. So without further ado, let's not bug this bear anymore and jump into it. So I'm actually surprised how easily and quickly that little tag came off. It just snapped off. So I was wondering if plastic actually gets more brittle after a long time, as this is a somewhat old piece of plastic. And therefore, with that, I proclaim this bugbear ready for his triad makeover. Alright, so don't tell anybody, but the brush I've been using up until this upcoming very moment has been a synthetic brush. And you've seen my last, or you haven't seen, but you can check it out, the last painting of the little goblin for Hero Quest. That was all by a synthetic brush. For miniatures particularly, I've always just bought brushes at Hobby Lobby. And until what I've learned recently is that while real hair brushes are a lot more expensive, they also last a lot longer. So that's what I'm actually really excited to find out. So if you're around the same page in this book of painting miniatures, then this should be an interesting exploration. So the last one that I was using that had initially white bristles, it's already kind of fanned out. I was using it for the base colors right now. This is the brush that I used for most, if not all, of that goblin miniature paint up. So basically it took about one full miniature before it completely lost its point, at least most of it. Now the brush that I'll be continuing on this miniature with detail work is a Kolinsky Pure Sable brush. So continuing in this video, we're not only going to be exploring how different an actual hairbrush is, but also these specific Kolinsky Sable brushes. One more point I wanted to hammer in is when people complain that they don't have the right tools or they have cheap tools for something, remember, it's always up to the skill, determination, and perseverance mostly to see how great of a creation someone can create. You can't just blame everything on the paints or a brush, because if you're a great artist, then you can take a box of cheap crayons and make a marvelous masterpiece. So now that all the hue shades are basically down, I'm going to be moving on to the next tones within those 3 color ranges. And as far as the brush goes, I don't want to use this wording, I am sold, because it's just silly, because this is something I should have been doing years ago. And to clarify, it wasn't just that they were more expensive that I didn't get them. The point is, I wasn't even aware of it, that there's quite a difference between real hair and synthetic hair brushes, because I never really read about it. I didn't see anything about it anywhere. All in all, it wasn't until watching YouTubers talk about miniature painting that actually brought up the details surrounding brushes. And now it all makes sense. The brush licking, the retention of paint. So as far as the one I've been using, this is a number 2. As you saw in the close-up, it's even quite a bit longer, but the tip stays much sharper longer. And also the reason behind why the sable brushes are preferred is because that shape of the sable here works to store water and the paint without releasing it too fast or too slow. Prior to this newfound knowledge, and even the knowledge of that I need a brush this big, I was buying brushes that were just tiny because I thought the smaller the brushes, the better the detail I can do, and so the better the miniature, which was totally wrong, because the tip on a brush even this size, and I do have a little bit smaller, is actually better than a lot of those tiny tips, and the point is it stores that moisture. Whereas the tiny tipped brushes I was using, I painted up some miniatures with those, but while going through those grueling tasks, I hadn't realized how quick they were drying out, and that's what happens with them. You can do pretty much 1 stroke or 2 stroke before it starts to dry up. So they are useful for little tiny details such as drawing stripes and working on eyeballs and the irises and pupils. Otherwise, there's no usage for them unless you want a big headache. When I watch a video of another painter painting a miniature, I always feel like when I'm doing it, it feels a little bit more grueling and difficult than what it seems like when they're doing it in the video, and it's all because of these brushes. It's just how much easier or harder is it going to be for you. It's like digital sculpting or painting with a mouse as opposed to a tablet. That might not be the best example, but that's also a way I started out with digital art, was with an actual mouse. So anyway, enough about the brushes and all that. If I have something else to say, I'll bring it up at the end of this video. Let's carry on with this Bugbear. And with the final strokes on the belt that I almost forgot, the Bugbear is done. Now obviously with the Triad, the 3 color choices that I went with kind of agreed on what I initially wanted with the tannish and the dark brown fur. But the surprise here was that blue, or the outstanding color. And I think it came out pretty awesome. That's not normally a color I would have gone with. And the neat thing about it is it can stand as a metallic color, just regular steel possibly, or some sort of different sort of metal or enchanted even metal. But those blues really do extra shine when they're next to that reddish leather armor there. But my favorite part would probably have to be that mask. Once I started hitting the blues on that mask, this really came to life. Going back to the brushes here, so I did forget to mention which ones these are. These are the Kolinsky Pure Sable, the ZEM, Z-E-M brushes over on Amazon. And as you saw, that main brush that I was working with, I think that's number 2, was working splendidly until I pulled out the smaller one in here. It was not being predictable and pushing the paint where it should have been, and the hairs kept frailing out. So all in all, the bigger brush had more detail than that one, which pretty much worked out to do, say, 95 or more % of the miniature. Is quite an awesome brush. And for any level of detail work, I will not be using synthetic brushes going forward. The synergy between I and this brush was wonderful. It understood me and I learned to understand it. Now then, this guy had a lot more detail than my previous paint job, which was the goblin from Hero Quest. Although with that one I did follow the color scheme and I did get rather serious with that blending. So you can see the potential synthetic brushes have.